Hello, 360 Talk Radio for Women. This is Dawn Abbott on the book tour with my show called Your Life is Not a To-Do List. That title is also the title of my newly released book, Your Life is Not a To-Do List, Finding More Joy on Your Entrepreneurial Journey. So we are 6 episodes in. This is the 6th episode, and I am going to talk about the joy brought with letting go of control. So this idea that you can actually have more joy when you release control a little bit. So in chapter 4 of the book, the chapter title is It's Not Your Plan. I talk about in 2012, the fall of 2012, a big sort of life quake. So in that year, the business was doing pretty well. The businesses, we had 3 businesses at that point. The businesses were doing well. We had a little more life balance. We were right on the precipice of empty nesting. So our kids were 18 and 21. Josh was going back to college in the fall, and Hogan would be starting his senior year in high school. And so at 18 and 21, we're almost done with that marathon, so to speak, right? And I loved raising children, but it takes everything you have. And if anyone tells you that it's just a piece of cake, they're lying. It takes all of your heart and soul and creates huge expectations and huge disappointments and lots of love and fun. But it's kind of all consuming for the most part. So in October of 2012, Josh was turning 21, and we thought it would be fun to take him and a couple of his friends to Las Vegas to celebrate. And so my dad and Tim, my husband, and both of the boys, some of Josh's friends, all head off to a weekend to celebrate his birthday. And my attempt at that point was to control the situation and mother hen it as much as I could, meaning, make sure that everyone was going to stay safe and the city of debauchery, was going to not destroy anyone, etc. And so while most of the group went off to the city to do Vegas stuff, Hogan, who was 17 at that time, and I decided to take in the sights and rode a roller coaster. And I hadn't been really feeling well, and I was tired and sort of nauseous. I thought I might be coming down with something. And so if you remember in early episodes or earlier in the book, I talk about it was difficult for me to have children. I didn't have normal cycles. In fact, I had had one menstrual cycle my entire life when the miracle of our firstborn, Surprise, had come to fruition. So I was told, that it would be very difficult for me to have children. And then along came Josh as a complete surprise. And I did not know I was pregnant with him for 4 months because I wasn't late. And then Hogan came along 3.5 years later with the help of fertility medications and some treatments. We tried for several years to have a third, and then realized this is stupid. I was getting shots in my butt. I was on all kinds of hormones, making me grumpy. And I thought, I am so blessed to have been given 2 healthy, beautiful sons. And we're going to move on from having any more. And so we never, while we casually discussed birth control. We never really, we stopped trying to have another baby. We never we never started not trying. So there was no real birth control. So when I felt so bad in Las Vegas, I sort of mentally listed my symptoms to myself and thought, weird, that sounds like pregnancy. I wonder if I am going through menopause, because that could have been, or premenopause, that could have been completely normal. I was 44 at the time. So I thought, that that's interesting. But maybe I should just grab a pregnancy test just to make sure. I had done that several times over the last 18 years of not being on any birth control and having these like suspicions and wondering. But I've never really thought it would ever happen without medical intervention. And so I never really worried about it. So I went to the CVS on the Strip, which is, how cliche. Thank goodness we didn't have to go to the wedding chapel. So anyway, 4 positive pregnancy tests later, I sort of accepted the fact that I'm pregnant. So Tim crawled into bed that night at about 3 a.m. And I got up at about 6 a.m. to take these tests and got back in bed and was crying because I was thinking, here we are at the end of that marathon, and how could I possibly start another new marathon? And Tim asked about why I was crying, sort of rolled over as I woke him up. And I told him the news, and his response was, oh shit. And then he rolled over and went back to sleep. And then the rest of the day, we're with this whole group of people. And so we really didn't have any time to talk about it. And the next moment we did have, he said, well, what else were we going to do for the next 20 years? And I was like, are you kidding me? I had a plan, and I believe in plans. I lived by plans. I was going to do a lot. And the idea was we were going to go into this next phase of life and potentially sell the largest business and then keep the other 2. And we were each going to run one. And the idea was, after 20 plus years of running businesses together, how pleasant would it be to sort of just focus on our marriage and not business partnership and not co-parenting, because these kids would be off to school. And so that, and then I had a whole bunch of plans as to what I was going to do with my life now that I was in a place of not having to give all of myself to work and my children. So I spent some time sort of not sharing this news, really trying to take on what this looked like and what this meant for our future. Tim, once again, was all in. He was like, I know you did the heavy lifting with the parenting of the first 2, but I've got you. I'll totally be focused on parenting. You make your plans, do your thing. And then when he found out we were expecting a girl, right, he was like, she's going to be daddy's girl. I'll be wrapped around her finger. I'm not ashamed to admit it. She's going to be my girl. And so a friend quoted to me at the time an old Yiddish proverb that says, we plan, God laughs. So that's sort of the, as I started sharing the news, right, there was lots of responses of what, initial shock. And so after I sort of recovered from that initial shock and process it, I did get excited about our new blessing. And I had a very spiritual moment at one point where I awoke one morning, and I was about 3 months into the pregnancy. And I just seriously sensed that this baby was a gift from God. I believed somewhere deep in my gut, my heart, that she would cure cancer or lead us into world peace, or there was some major reason that was way bigger than me that this child was coming along. And I joked that, the Virgin Mary and I were meant to sacrifice for all of humanity and through the birth of our children and silly things like that. But I really did believe it was a blessing that I was very thankful for. And I, decided to start planning and did all the research. And this is, almost 20 years after having my last child. And so, I wanted to make sure that I designed a life that was perfect for raising her. I wanted to make sure that my ceiling was her floor. And so to raise my ceiling as far up as I possibly could to launch her, I wanted to live very authentically and share my mistakes and with her and help her understand that she could make mistakes and help her focus on her strengths. And so it was, I during the present pregnancy, I was very focused on how I was going to be a great parent. And so then, when she came along, that one of the greatest things is she's like 100% Tim Abbott's DNA. She looks like him, she talks like him, she gestures and moves like him. And so we welcomed her in May of 2013. And then, as you know, if you've been listening or you've read my book, we lost my husband in an accident when she was 3 months old while we were on vacation. And so what I learned is she didn't have to cure cancer or save the world, right? She was just here to save me. And she became my life raft. And she became, the next best thing they tell you to do during grief. Just do the next best thing. The next best thing for me at that point was keeping a child alive. That meant feeding her and changing a diaper and putting her down for a nap, and then she'd cry again. And so really keeping her alive became the life raft that I needed to get through that time with sobriety and sanity, right? To not just go to bed with a bottle of wine and forget life, as my boys were both heading off to college. So she was born 4 days before Hogan graduated from high school. And so, by the time Tim died in August, shortly after that, Hogan went off to college and Josh went back to college. And so I was alone in this house with this amazing accidental blessing that was our daughter. So I feel like a lot of my life is been this lesson in you are not in control. I feel like every time I think I am, I get another thump on the forehead that reminds me you're not in control. And so I want to go back to a previous episode where I talk about the locus of control, where I encourage you to take responsibility, ownership, and accountability for all in your life, to look towards internal control. What am I controlling versus external control, where you are in a life of blame, excuses, and denial, where everything external is the reason for all your problems. And so I don't want to confuse this part of control, right? So that idea is when things are happening, you have to turn to yourself and say, what was my part in what was happening? As well as take responsibility for the decisions you make, for the actions, for your behaviors, and all of those things. So that's a different kind of control. That's where you look for control, for lessons learned, right? Internally is what I'm encouraging, versus blaming the rest of the world and having an excuse for everything that goes wrong, which means you don't have any control over the outcome. Right? Whereas if you're taking control internally, what you're saying is, I did have a part in this happening to me. I did make XYZ decision or whatever it is. And so I just said XYZ. It's fun. I'm going to start saying that from here on out. You've made a decision, you've behaved a certain way, you've made a choice, etc., which was part of the outcome of the situation. So if I want to take control and not let something negative happen to me in the future, I will take control of making a better decision, right? So this control that I'm talking about today is this idea of we think we can plan and we can control the outcome. And so what I'm advocating here is sort of letting go of a lot of that control. There's sort of two facets to this. One is I use this tool called my worry container because I know a lot of women, as women, we can let our worry take over, right? So we can go from worrying about our house and our family to all of a sudden our families, friends and family, to the whole neighborhood, to not just our businesses and our employees, but our employees' families and their lives, and all the other external forces and control that could hurt our business. And we're in this sense or this cycle of stress and worry all the time. And I just like to visualize the analogy of the size of my worry container. And so if I allow my worry container to be the size of Denver, Colorado, I'm going to be stressed a lot and I'm not going to be able to find any joy in that stress. So what I can do instead is visualize, and I actually have a visual picture of it with a little basket. It's a little covered basket, right? It's a round little ball. And I have that on my desk to remind myself that this is as much worry as I have capacity for. I make my worry container small. So when my worries start going crazy, I can say, oops, you know what? That's not mine and it won't fit in my worry container. And so the other sort of idea of this is you can make plans and strive to be your best and take responsibility for your actions, pray for what you want. But remember, life doesn't happen according to your plan. And so what you have to understand is how much joy this feeling of control is stealing from you. How much of your life is being basically controlled by this need to control, right? And its control serves very little very little purpose, excuse me. Control doesn't serve a purpose. It's a process for confirmation bias. So we think we're in control when something we want and plan for comes to fruition. So we considered it, we planned it, everything went as planned, and so we think we have so much control. Well, how much weight do you give to those plans that go awry? For whatever reason, they might go awry. Sometimes they go wrong because of things we did or didn't do. And other times it's because of circumstances that are far out of our control. And to let go of control doesn't mean you stop planning or you stop trying to do things. It's instead about releasing fear and anxiety that causes us to cling to what we think we know. And there was a Fast Company article where Anissa Purbasari Horton writes, we tend to ask questions and generate what ifs as an attempt to introduce some certainty when we're uncomfortable with the known. But psychologist Simon Rigo says a more mindful way to approach this rather than, generate what ifs about all the things coming up in our life and thinking that's going to happen or we're going to plan for those what ifs. A more mindful approach is to build tolerance for uncertainty. You can slowly identify which of your worries are useful and which are making you unnecessarily miserable. You can choose to let go of the latter and prepare for strategic solutions for the former with an understanding that uncertainty is okay. And you don't have to know everything. And there's also so much beauty in the uncertainty. In fact, let me share a story that just happened yesterday based on my belief in this tool of letting go of control. So I'm in Hawaii. I'm on the big island of Hawaii right now with my daughter. We're on vacation. And yesterday we had reservations at the Seahorse Farm, and we had another plan at another certain time. So we had some plans in place for the day, but something took a little longer. And so now we didn't have time to go do what we were going to do prior to the Seahorse Farm. But we had this hour and a half, and we were sort of in a part of the island. There's really not much to do. And so that would have made me absolutely crazy in a previous life where I started understanding the beauty that comes with uncertainty. And so instead I was like, okay, let's live in this moment. And what is going to happen is going to be magical. I'm going to let it unfold. We don't have a plan. I don't have a lot of control. We don't have time to drive anywhere to do anything. And here we are. And so I'm driving down a road and I see some people on a beach, and I see a little parking lot. And this is very, very much an away from, out of the ordinary. There's no resorts on in this area of the island. This is not a normal beach you would go to. So I pull in. I notice there's a shower and a restroom. I'm like, okay, that's perfect. Let's just go walk along this beach and see what happens. What we ended up stumbling upon is this rock formation had created this amazing like lagoon. And it was this completely waveless, tide pools, and a deep enough to like swim, like deep enough, to my chest. And so we got our bathing suits on, we played in this lagoon, we were able to shower off, get dressed, and go to the Seahorse Museum. So had I been stressed and about the mess up in our plan, and now it's not going to work out, and I could have just sat and returned emails on my phone in the car and had them wasted an hour and a half. And instead we found a place that we're probably going to go back to because it was so fun. So there's some joy that came from the uncertainty or the unplanned or the lack of control. The other thing I want to share with you is this sort of mantra I do with hand gestures that might be helpful. I'm clearly somewhat of a visual person, right? So I create these visuals. So what I do is I use my hand and I say mine while I'm patting on my chest. This is mine to worry about and to control. Theirs, pointing outwardly. These are their problems. My grown children. I can't control their decisions. They don't let me. I would if they let me, but at now 28 and almost 32, those boys, I have very little control over their decisions. I can encourage, I can talk with, I can be support of. However, they run their own lives now. And so when I start worrying about what they're going to do and their choices and all that, that's when I have to say theirs, pointing outwardly, not mine, right? And then lastly, I can say his while pointing up, helping me to kind of remember that this is mine to worry about. I can try to take control of that. I can make a plan for that. Theirs, I don't have control. So stop worrying about it, right? It's out of my control. And his, like the weather and a tornado and whatever else crazy we think of, God's got that. We don't have the capacity to worry about things that are so far out of our control. All we can do is he's got it, right? So yeah, again, I would just encourage you to consider the beauty in uncertainty, understanding that you don't have as much control as you think, and feel joy from that. Like, it's incredibly dominating in terms of stress when you think you can control everything, when you think it's actually up to you. Like, how arrogant, first of all. I spent so much time there thinking like I had to do everything for everyone and control all the outcomes here and make all the plans. Like, a vacation without plans would be insane for me, when really it's so much more beautiful and joyful when you plan for some of it, create some kind of, you know, map for the outcome, but be okay when it doesn't turn out, because I promise you there's times it just won't turn out. And I mentioned earlier, my life has been one big lesson that I keep learning over and over again. I'm still learning it. I just learned it again yesterday, right? Just had to be reminded of something small. But if I look at the course of my life and think, you know, I didn't intend to get pregnant at 21 with a miracle child, but I wasn't really controlling that, apparently. And then the birth of my third child, 21 years after my first, not my plan. And could I have controlled that? Yes, but thank God I didn't. Thank God I didn't try to control that. So I'm very happy with that outcome, right? I prayed for what I wanted, and sometimes you get what you need. And then I think of COVID. Like, I used to say, I'm a small business owner, so therefore I'm in control of my future, right? I can't get laid off. If things look tough, I just work a little harder, but I've got this. I'm in control of my destiny with my small business. And then COVID happened when my business was completely shut down. One more reminder, thump right on the forehead. Not even this, girlfriend. You're not even in control of all of this. Even though everything was working amazingly, having the best year the business has ever had, thinking I've finally sort of made it to this place of a self-managed company where everything's just running efficiently and profitably, and oh, you've done nothing wrong here. You've made no bad decision, but COVID is shutting your event business down. And I had to go through this space of realization of not even that, and go through that grief, right? The loss of my husband after 25 years of marriage. I did not plan to be a widow with a 3-month-old, but we plan, God laughs. So I will end there. Thank you so much for tuning in. The best place to listen, if I didn't mention at the beginning, is by downloading the 360 Talk Radio for Women app. And my show, as well as lots of other great content, can be found on that app. So please tune in. Thank you for being here today. And I will be back with another episode of Your Life is Not a To-Do List next week. Take good care.